Rio de Janeiro, November 6th, 1817. Today is something Brazil has never seen before: a royal wedding. Prince Pedro I, son of John VI, has just met his wife, the Austrian archduchess Maria Leopoldina. Now, they've already been married by proxy, but they have not met until this day of masses and festivities. Maria, clever and sincere, has prepared herself for this new world. She's learned Portuguese, her seventh language, and pored over maps of the country. Fascinated by natural science, she's traveled from Europe with her collection of interesting minerals and brought new plants to introduce to Brazil. The Rio Maria sees is no longer a backwater. It's a city of universities and government buildings, today decorated in celebratory garlands and banners. People lean out of windows to cheer her, no longer a colony, but a kingdom. A kingdom she and her new husband, whose eye, even now, is already wandering towards other women in the crowd, will steer towards separation with Portugal. Thanks so much to Morning Brew for helping to bring this history to life. Despite John VI and his royal family's flight from Portugal, he remained a major figure in the imaginations of his subjects back home. After all, they still had a king, even though he lived across the Atlantic and ruled from a colony. And as the Napoleonic Wars came to a close in 1814, and Portugal once again ruled itself, there was a hope that the man that his subjects called Dom João would return to head the empire from his proper place in Lisbon. But John himself was not so keen on that. See, despite Napoleon's defeat and exile, things in Europe were not totally stable. The ideas of the French and American revolutions were spreading, and throughout Europe, people were arguing for greater personal rights, freedoms, and to constitutionally constrain the powers of monarchy and the church. And though French troops had vacated Portugal, they'd left these revolutionary ideas behind, which proved popular since Portugal was one of the last absolute monarchies on the continent. Indeed, when the great powers met in the Congress of Vienna after Napoleon's defeat, one of their goals was to reinforce traditional monarchy and restrain this liberal explosion. Meanwhile, Portugal's oldest ally, Britain, was starting to pressure Portugal on its slave trade, a situation John just had to accept, since with Napoleon gone, the British were administering Portugal as what amounted to a protectorate. So, between the specter of liberal revolution in Lisbon, the pressures from the British, and wanting to draw Brazil and Portugal closer, John decided to postpone his triumphant return to, well, later sometime, eventually. However, he couldn't govern from a colony. Instead, he elevated Brazil, declaring in 1815 that it was its own kingdom and that he was now the regent of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves. It was a stunning move, one that officially marked Brazil as more than just a temporary seat of government in exile. Brazil wasn't independent, sure, but it was in the big boys club, not a colony, but an integral part of the kingdom. All the economic, political, and trade restrictions meant to stunt Brazil's growth, to ensure it did not grow to eclipse its colonial master, were gone. And in both Lisbon and Rio, everybody knew the consequences would be enormous. But King John, and he was officially king after his mother died in 1816, would be forced shortly to choose between his two kingdoms. In 1820, troops in northern Portugal mutinied, and a liberal revolution broke out, spreading within weeks in a largely bloodless victory. Spurred by anger at British command of Portuguese troops, the monarchy's lack of assistance during the war, and a feeling that Portugal was being governed like a colony from Brazil, the rebels had many contradictory positions, but all demanded John's immediate return. John, as was his way, remained indecisive. Liberal revolts were not new to him, with Brazil having experienced one 3 years before, when a bloc in the country's northeast, angry about the capital being moved to Rio and their inability to get the king to consider local issues, briefly seized power. Now he'd put that down with force, but that wasn't an option in Portugal. Factions broke out in Rio. One faction insisted on the monarch's return to Lisbon, while another worried what that would mean for Brazil. Would their status be demoted? Without the unifying leadership of a monarch, would Brazil declare independence and break apart? And that last one was a real possibility. It was already happening to Spain's American empire, with huge provinces breaking away from Spanish control and fragmenting into multiple countries. Courtiers tried to sway John. Would it not be better to be an absolute monarch in Brazil than a prisoner of revolutionaries in Lisbon? Ironically, though John was widely disliked, both Lisbon and Rio wanted him. Sure, he was indecisive. Sure, he'd abandoned Portugal, and okay, he did keep hunks of chicken in his coat pocket as snacks. But he was a unifying figure, and there was only one of him. Unless... When Pedro was first summoned to his father's chamber, he was confused, because the two, to put it mildly, did not get along. While John was an absolutist, Pedro had an appetite for works of Enlightenment philosophy that preached liberal constitutionalism. In fact, his wife Maria, herself a Habsburg absolutist, was known to sigh and say, Pedro, God help us, loves the new ideas. Besides, John had not raised him to rule. Pedro's eldest sister, Maria Teresa, was the one who advised their father and performed most of Pedro's state functions. John also disliked Pedro's playboy reputation. So Pedro must have been in shock as his father declared that he would go to Lisbon to serve as regent of Portugal, while John stayed in Brazil. But the situation changed at the last minute. Portuguese troops mutinied in Rio, threatening to spread the revolution across the Atlantic. And while John was once again split with indecision, Pedro, though at the theater at the time, left and rode out with local Brazilian troops and brutally crushed the uprising. Maria, for her part, got on the stage after he exited and reassured the audience her husband was handling things. Days later, it was decided. They would switch. John would return to Lisbon, while Pedro would stay as regent. Pedro, John reportedly said, if Brazil declares independence, let it rather do so for you, who will respect me, than for one of those adventurers. And you know, if he did say that, it was an eerily accurate prediction. Because when John arrived in Lisbon, the Cortes, an old parliamentary institution revived by the revolutionaries, forced him to sign the constitution they'd drafted. He was an absolute monarch, no more. Back in Brazil, Pedro was cutting government spending, lowering taxes, and guaranteeing basic rights. Mostly, though, in an attempt to fix the financial problems his father had left when he'd sailed off to Lisbon with most of the treasury. But he also battled multiple army uprisings, ending most through personal negotiation, but finally having to expel one Portuguese general. Meanwhile, in Lisbon, things were not going well for Brazil at the new Cortes. Brazilian representatives showed up expecting to be treated as equals, only to find their concerns overridden and their kingdom mocked. Portuguese representatives insisted on turning Brazil back into a colony and giving Portugal a monopoly on its trade. The Cortes voted to dissolve the Brazilian government and force Pedro to return. Faced with this possibility, and handed a petition signed by 8,000 Brazilians asking him to remain, he stated his intention was to stay. Then, Pedro continued to negotiate, but behind the scenes, he was gathering allies. One was José Bonapacio de Andrada y Silva, an able minister and a longtime supporter of both Brazilian independence and the abolition of slavery. Though perhaps his most surprising ally was his wife Maria, who by now left her Habsburg teachings behind and became a budding liberal, pushing her husband toward independence. Also, Pedro began quietly visiting cities across Brazil with a small entourage in order to shore up his support before declaring independence, waiting for the Cortes to do something so offensive he'd have a strong hand. September 7th, 1822. Outside Sao Paulo. Dom Pedro is riding an old mare, with only 38 followers, heading back to Rio. Ill with a stomach bug, he keeps having to stop the group and dismount due to attacks of diarrhea. Yeah, the scene wouldn't really make for a very good nationalist oil painting. But that's where the messenger finds him and delivers the news. It is final. The Cortes will not accept any form of self-government for Brazil. It must return to its former role as a colony. Now, accounts of this moment differ. One says he picked the ribbon from his hat, the one with the Portuguese national colors, and throws it on the ground. Another account says that he is filled with rage at, in his words, Portugal's attempt to enslave Brazil. You know, a little ironic considering Brazil is the continent's largest slave economy, so yeah. Then, he turns to the little retinue and makes a statement. Again, witnesses record his words differently, but all agree on the final pronouncement. Independence or death. Woohoo, that's a heck of a headline. You know, Zoe, if a world leader made that proclamation today, it sounds like something we'd be reading about in our morning brew. What's Morning Brew, you ask? Well, it's a free daily newsletter, Monday through Sunday, that gets you caught up on the most important news stories of the day in tech, finance, business, and entertainment. Meaning, you can get caught up to speed every morning via a witty, relevant, and informative summary of the day's important issues. Before I starting my day with Morning Brew, it took me way longer to get my news fix across a bunch of different platforms. But now in about 5 minutes, I'm caught up on a ton of current stories that I'm interested in before I even finish my coffee. For example, the other morning, I got up to speed on Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, complete with just the best headline, by the way. Learned how major airlines are pushing back on 5G rollout around airports, and I saw the best news. Daniel Radcliffe will be playing Weird Al in an upcoming biopic, which in my head is just chef's kiss perfection. aka precisely the mix of news I'm very interested in reading. Not to mention, Morning Brew is completely free, and it takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. All you gotta do is click the link in the description below to get Morning Brew in your inbox Monday through Sunday. Then you'll get a newsletter you're psyched to start your mornings with, while also supporting our team at Extra Credits without spending a penny, which, as always, we can't thank you for enough. Greetings, O'Reels 1, Kyle Wooldridge, Cal Murgatroyd, Joseph Blame, Dominic Valenciana, Casey Bustia, Alicia Bramble, and Ahmed Ziad Turk. Thanks so much for being legendary patrons.